Hello, welcome to Interdependent Study, our podcast, where we engage in the learning and unlearning work for collective liberation. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Damien. Thank you so much for joining us today. Each week, we'll bring something new to the table and discuss our thoughts and feelings about it through the lenses of who we are and where we can go for a more just society.
We want Interdependent Study to be a space where we're always learning with one another, and Damien is up this week.
Yes.
What do you bring to the table today?
So I have brought another piece from the newest issue of Hammer and Hope to the table for us to talk about today. The piece is called "The Supreme Court Blesses the Destruction of Black Electoral Power." And it was written by Vincent M. Southerland. Vincent is an author as well as an associate professor of law at NYU School of Law, where he also directs their Center on Race, Inequality, and the Law, which engages in advocacy work, research, and public education to advance racial justice. And so Vincent's piece that we read for today is an analysis of the Supreme Court's recent decision in Louisiana v. Callais that essentially has dealt a fatal blow to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which, as we all know, was the law of the land that ensured that the government enforced the 15th Amendment and did not deny anyone the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude, and worked to advance civil rights in so many incredible and positive ways over the years, right? And so I thought I would ground our conversation by sharing a part of the dissent to this decision that Vincent shares in this piece, because it highlights to me just how game-changingly damaging this decision is. So he says, quote, "To illustrate the effects of this decision, Kagan suggests that we imagine a hypothetical circle-shaped single-county district in a rectangle-shaped state. The circle's population, thanks to historical patterns of racial segregation, is 90% black. The surrounding rectangle is 90% white. Voting is racially polarized, with black residents voting overwhelmingly for Democratic candidates and white ones voting for Republicans. Those who reside in the circle elect representatives that no one in the remaining rectangle would put in office. Under these conditions, the circle's black community is able to elect a representative of its choice year after year. Kagan then asks us to imagine that the state legislature decides to eliminate the political power of the circle. It splits the circle into 6 equal slices and distributes the black voters into 6 new, solidly white congressional districts. With the state's black voters dispersed into predominantly white districts, they cannot elect a representative of their choice. Election after election, black citizens' votes are, by every practical measure, wasted," Kagan wrote. And that is wild, right? Like, black citizens' votes can and will be just wasted votes. And that is, without a doubt, infuriating, right? Which, to me, doesn't even feel like strong enough of a word to describe how I feel about this. But it's also just, at the end of the day, moving us in the completely wrong direction as a nation. And so that is what this piece is about. So let's get into it, my friend. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I thought this was a great piece, and I thought that illustration from Kagan of how cracking up political power happens through these electoral maps and the way that they're drawn was powerful to be entered into the historical record of the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yes.
Which, as we've all seen on the internet, gives a bad name to the many, many menu items that you can get at Taco Bell.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. I've seen a chalupa more supreme than this court.
I love it. Is the joke.
The running bit. But one of the things that I actually want to highlight, aside from Taco Bell menu items, is how the Voting Rights Act was really successful over the course of its history over the last 60 years, really 50, because the Supreme Court has already gutted parts of the Voting Rights Act in 2012 or 2013. But 60 years-ish.
Yeah, really powerful. Yeah.
So Vincent says, quote, "Since its enactment, the law has been used to challenge and often eliminate restrictions on voting used by states across the South during the Jim Crow era to lock in a white supremacist hierarchy based on racial caste. It achieved nothing short of a political transformation. Just 1 year after the Voting Rights Act was passed, the percentage of black registered voters had risen from 11% a decade earlier to 51% in Alabama, and from 27% to 72% in Tennessee over the same time period.
Wow.
There were 6 black members of the House of Representatives and no black senators when the law was enacted. That grew to 21 as of the start of Congress's new term in 1985, and 63 by 2025, along with 5 black U.S. senators. The expansion of black representation in local political offices was even more dramatic. The Supreme Court decision in Callais not only forecloses future progress, it threatens to impose the conditions of a pre-civil rights past.
Wow.
Yeah, and as you said, this law ensured that the 15th Amendment was actually applied to local electoral policies across the entirety of the United States.
Right.
And what has happened is that it has been so effective over its time that the Supreme Court has decided that we don't need it anymore because the issues that it addresses are no longer the issues we see today.
Yeah.
So we must not need it anymore, right?
How crazy.
It's so short-sighted and it's so idiotic. It just does not recognize the reality that came to pass almost immediately after this decision.
Yeah.
That I think we'll talk about in a minute here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of how much this law was needed to protect the voting power, the voting rights of black people and other racialized minorities in this country.
Yeah, and I think that's the big part, like the protecting of black folks and other marginalized folks who vote. Like in and of itself would have been enough of a reason for this law to exist, and is enough of a reason for it to be one of the signature pieces of laws in our country. But you talked about these incredible stats about just the how many more black folk got registered to vote and how black folks were represented in, you know, the highest offices and leadership roles in this country. Like the representation that came from it too. I mean, all of the impact of this is profound.
Well, and we've watched documentaries where we see Kwame Ture, then Stokely Carmichael, walking and trying to get people to register to vote in Mississippi. And they wouldn't do it because they were afraid. And so this law changed that fear and
changed the game.
It completely changed the game.
Absolutely.
And so for it to be continually gutted by this Supreme Court, this Roberts Supreme Court, I think is a real shame. It's a real stain on his legacy, and he will carry that forever, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of them, actually.
All of them, actually. Yeah. So one of the other major takeaways of this piece and this Supreme Court decision is just the immediate aftermath that has taken place. And you kind of alluded to this since the decision was released. So Vincent says this, quote, "Much as it has done before, the Supreme Court changed the rules of the game that prevailed for half a century to allow Republicans to lock in a white majoritarian partisan advantage in states that they control, while blunting the tools created to challenge it. As Kagan concluded, the court's decision will set back the foundational right Congress granted of racial equality and electoral opportunity. Callais has had an immediate impact. Within days, Republican-controlled legislatures in the South moved to eliminate black majority districts in their states. Before the decision was handed down, Florida had begun the process of following Texas's gerrymandering example with new maps that will snuff out much of the remaining black political power in the state. In Tennessee, Republicans carved up the state's one reliably Democratic congressional district, which is centered in Memphis, one of America's largest majority black cities. In Louisiana, the Supreme Court okayed a plan to call off an election that was already in progress in order to eliminate the second majority black district. Alabama got the Supreme Court's blessing to reinstate a map that a lower court had determined was racially discriminatory, eliminating one of 2 black majority districts. Representative Shamari Figures, whose election in 2024 marked the first time that Alabama had sent 2 black members to the House of Representatives, will likely lose his seat. In South Carolina, the state Senate stopped short of approving a new map to eliminate the state's only Democratic district and end Representative James Clyburn's 30-plus years in the House of Representatives. But Republicans will no doubt try again next year.
Yep.
And so you alluded to this, like it's already started to happen. And right there and alone there, that's 5 huge states immediately jumping, and in some cases jumping before the decision was made, jumping at the chance to strip rights away from their black citizens and probably joyfully doing so. And to me, like, it's so disgusting. It's so sad. It's infuriating, again, to use that word. And it's really scary that it's happening in 2026. And when you think about the progress, and you talked about this, the progress that the Voting Rights Act allowed and ushered into this country, here we are just taking a stab at it.
Yeah,
chipping away at
and
it.
the impact of that decision, as you said, was nearly immediate. I
Yeah.
mean, the reason the decision was made because people were already pushing for it and anticipated that this was the decision that would get made.
Right.
And so that's why that happened. But I've also seen Ashley Woodard Henderson talk about that new Tennessee map recently, as there's been a lot of movement, there's been a lot of work to ensure that Justin Pearson still get elected to the House as he moves from the Tennessee State House to the U.S. House of Representatives, hopefully. And I believe he was elected in his recent primary.
He was.
Which I think was unexpected.
Yeah.
I don't. So we'll see how all that shakes out when we get to the actual general election. But hopefully, there's good signs that the work that they did won't come to fruition.
Yes.
And so we'll see how that shakes out, I guess. But yeah, that decision has meant a lot. This decision will change a lot of things. So Vincent says at one point, quote, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was designed to judge the racist effects of electoral practices on black voters. So the measurement, what they were trying to understand, what they're trying to prevent, was what kind of impact policies had on black voters.
Right.
So you had to prove that that's not what you were doing.
Yep.
And they've now shifted that. So Vincent says, quote, the 6 justices in the majority looked away from history and inserted their own judgment, exchanging the law as written and rewritten by Congress for the law as they wanted it. In the place of an effects test to determine violations of the law, they imposed an intent test. It no longer matters how a change to the state's maps affects black voters. Now the only actionable proof of a constitutional violation is to show that the change was motivated by an identifiable individual or individuals driven by racist animus. This will make it all but impossible to prove Voting Rights Act's claims going forward.
Yes.
And as Vincent points out there, intent is next to impossible to prove.
Absolutely.
You have to have a smoking gun that says, hey, let's mess up the black vote.
Yes.
And they don't do, nobody does that.
They don't do that.
Nobody does that.
No.
And so proving that intent is going to be nearly impossible. But Vincent goes on later in the article to say, quote, as long as the perpetrator did not act with expressed intent, there is no avenue for recourse, regardless of the harm inflicted. Under the conservative majority's framework, policies and practices that are race neutral on their face but lead to harmful outcomes for black people are beyond the reach of the law.
Crazy.
Yeah, and it's just it's putting the proof on black people who have been disenfranchised to say, I've been disenfranchised because of this, or my vote has been watered down because of this. And you can't prove that if you don't have an intent.
Prove it.
Yeah, and that's so rather than making the policymakers prove that that's not their intent or that's not their effect of their policies, now it's up to the individuals.
Absolutely.
Which is a pattern of this neoliberal shift that we've been in, of shifting things from institutional societal concerns or issues or struggles or what have you to the individual.
Absolutely.
And we're shifting this now to the individual.
Absolutely. So related to this, and again, you started to allude to this earlier, there's another piece of this analysis that Vincent shares that, we've heard before, we've talked about before, but so he says, quote, as shocking as it is, the Supreme Court's decision is not surprising when considered in context.
Yep.
The court has long been gripped by what former Justice William Brennan called a fear of too much justice, one that flows from its perspective on race and racism. In Callais, as in a 2013 decision gutting a different provision of the Voting Rights Act, the conservative supermajority justified their decision by insisting that much has changed for the better in the South, including racism in voting practices. Like a fear of too much justice in the context of race and racism in this country is such a wild and crazy concept. And it's like they're saying, we fixed it. It's all fixed, so we don't need this. And that is crazy, because I'm going to say something really controversial here. I don't know if you're ready for that, right? This is a racist country.
What?
Yeah, it's a racist country. It always has been, and it seems to be that it's always going to be, especially when you have a Supreme Court rigging the system in this way.
Yeah, I am shocked, I tell you. Racism in this country?
In 2026?
You mean to tell me that the country that inspired the laws of the Third Reich is racist?
Yes.
Oh, man.
I
I'm going to
know.
have to go home and think about this for a while.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that analysis from Vincent is spot on.
Yeah.
And he continues it into the next paragraph, basically immediately after where you just ended your
Okay,
quote.
yep.
He says, quote, even putting aside the justices' head in the sand sensibilities about injustice in the South, their larger perspective on racism makes matters worse. The conservative majority subscribes to an ideology of colorblindness, the perverse idea that the way to deal with racial injustice is to ignore racism and treat everyone as though race does not matter.
Wow.
Conservatives have twisted Martin Luther King Jr.'s aspirational call to treat everyone equally, regardless of race, into a weapon to be used against inheritors of King's struggle for racial justice. And this streak of colorblindness is definitely going to continue to hold us back from any kind of progress because it ignores, by default, the realities of white supremacy in this country.
Absolutely.
It says that they don't matter. The real problem is that we're acknowledging race. And if we don't acknowledge it, everything goes away and fades into the background. And we know that that's nonsense.
Right. And it again, as you talked about, puts the onus on individuals to make this claim and to have that smoking gun, as you said. And that's just never going to happen.
Nope.
And so it just plays into and continues. It's only going to strengthen the realities of white supremacy, as you just said.
Yep.
Yeah. So that feels like application. So let's move there. Application is where we talk about how this piece and our conversation about it applies to our everyday lives and work. I wanted to share how Vincent closes this piece because his words there to me were a sober reminder, as he calls it, using his words, of this age-old idea of how this country always seems to find a way to make great progress and then take several seats back, sometimes miles and miles back. And his words were also a call to action for the work and the direction that's needed in the aftermath of this decision. So he closes the piece by saying, quote, Callais is a sober reminder of just how fragile the gains of the last half century are, and that progress is always met with resistance and retrenchment. The road ahead will be long and difficult, but if we take stock of the lessons of Callais, we might be able to forge a different path forward that ultimately vindicates the promises made in the Constitution. That work of forcing America to live up to its stated principles in its founding document is the subject of an ongoing battle for racial justice and equality in this country. That battle is far from over.
Yeah.
And I agree. That battle is absolutely far from over. And so now the work shifts to navigating this new world we're in, where Black people have less political and electoral power. And so we need to fight back, right, to get it back.
Yeah.
And I think by any means necessary.
Yeah. I think there's going to need to be a lot of movement to try to scrape back to where we were.
Yeah. Let alone
even a few months ago,
right,
to let alone 13 years ago or whenever Shelby was decided.
Right. Yeah. 13 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So my application is about the Supreme Court in general and their consistent shift to proving intent and their adherence to colorblindness. So Vincent says, quote, more recent Supreme Court rulings have continued in this vein. Most recently, to prevent institutions of higher education from considering race to enhance the diversity of their student bodies. Instead, using race at all in admissions is now seen as the problem. If the conservative justices get their way, the same reasoning will apply to any issue in which there is a racial dimension. Housing, environmental and climate justice, healthcare, employment, technology, and any other aspect of civic life. Yeah, this is their pattern that they will continue to apply to anything that connects to race, as Vincent just said. They want to obfuscate the realities in favor of putting the proof of impact on the targets of racism on Black people themselves, having to prove that this is something that's happening to them. Yeah, which is crazy making in its own way.
Yeah, absolutely. It is crazy to sit with the words that you just said when you think about like this is a decision around our voting rights, but here he's talking about housing, environmental justice, healthcare, employment, technology. I mean, that's every aspect of our lives is under attack. So to me, reading this, I felt like there were just alarm bells ringing in my ears as I read this, and I sat with the impact of this decision. And Vincent's words here are so powerful and made those alarm bells so much louder.
Yeah.
And thinking about, if they can do this and we allow this to happen, right? What else can and will happen? It's scary.
Yeah, and this is a blueprint, I think.
Yeah.
That's my thought process, and I think it mirrors what Vincent's saying here.
Yeah.
This is the direction that they're moving in, all these things, particularly with the 6-3 majority.
Yeah.
This is their worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's talk about homework. What do we want to do to continue our learning and unlearning work once we leave the table today? One thing I definitely want to do for homework that's related to this piece is I want to read the Louisiana v. Callais dissent that I referenced earlier. I want to read and understand everything that Justice Kagan and her colleagues had to say in it. I haven't actually sat with it and read it, and I'm sure it's, in one respect, it's going to give me some hope, and in another way, it's going to really just infuriate me even more. But I want to read it. The other piece of homework I want to do for sure is just for us to continue to read and engage with this latest issue of Hammer and Hope, because again, it's so great, and we continue to learn so much from them. So what about you?
Yeah, that's great homework. I co-sign all of that. I also want to go back and read a little bit more about the Shelby decision and how it's impacted the Voting Rights Act.
Yes,
because I know a little bit about that, but understanding how both of these decisions work together will be helpful in understanding the full impact that the Roberts Court has had and will have on voting in this country, and how it will expand beyond just the Voting Rights Act into other elements of our lives, as we just talked about too.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. I love that. All right, well, that's our conversation about this piece. Definitely check it out, and check out other articles from this latest edition of Hammer and Hope. Aaron, you're up next time. What are you bringing to the table in our next episode?
I bring our August book.
Wow.
Yep.
It's time.
Called Our History is the Future: Standing Rock versus the Dakota Access Pipeline and the Long Tradition of Indigenous Resistance. The book was written by Nick Estes and published by a few places, including Verso and Haymarket Books. They don't seem to be different editions.
Yeah.
But published sort of side by side. So get it wherever you would like to.
Right.
And as you might have guessed from the subtitle, the book, quote, traces traditions of indigenous resistance leading to the present campaigns against fossil fuel pipelines, such as the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, from the days of the Missouri River trading forts through the Indian Wars, the Pick-Sloan dams, the American Indian movement, and the campaign for indigenous rights at the United Nations. And this has been a great read so far, with a lot of context and history that has been really illuminating for me, and expanding on some other things that we've read for the podcast or I've read on my own. So I'm really looking forward to talking about it with you right here next week.
No, I'm excited. I think anytime we get a chance to learn more about indigenous resistance, the power that's there, and the impact that it has had on this country, I really enjoy those conversations. So I'm looking forward to finishing that book this week and definitely chatting about it with you too. Great. All right. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us today. You know what we want you to do here, but in case you forgot, please follow, leave a rating and review, share our podcast with the people in your life. Follow us on social media, including Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Check us out on YouTube, and sign up and join us on Patreon to get notified about any new things we've got going on behind the scenes.
Yes. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's not about us, but it is about all of us. And we'll talk to you next week.